Picture this, and I want you to really picture this. It's 1860, and you're standing on the Great Plains somewhere in what we'll eventually call Wyoming or Montana. You turn in a complete circle, 360 degrees, and you see nothing. Grassland stretching to the horizon in every direction. An ocean of grass under a sky so blue it almost hurts to look at. Now here's what most people don't understand about this emptiness. It wasn't empty at all. 300,000 Native Americans called these plains home, living as their ancestors had for generations. And when I say they followed the buffalo herds, I'm not talking about a few dozen animals. Imagine herds so massive they blackened the grasslands like moving mountains. Millions of buffalo. Some estimates put it at 30 million animals ranging across the plains. When they moved, you could hear them from miles away. A sound like distant thunder that never stopped, but something else was moving across those plains. Something that would change everything. Iron rails, creeping westward like serpents mile by mile, spike by spike. And following those rails came soldiers in blue coats, building forts along something called the Bozeman Trail, a road that cut straight through the heart of Lakota hunting grounds. Through the Powder River country, which was the last pristine buffalo range left, there was a warrior watching all this. His name was Red Cloud, and that name is going to echo through everything that happens next. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if these history tales fascinate you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, Red Cloud wasn't just any warrior. By 1866, he'd built something the United States government had never faced before on the plains, a genuine military confederation. Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, tribes that had spent generations fighting each other, united against a common threat. And Red Cloud was leading them. The army didn't take this seriously. Not at first. December 1866, Fort Phil Kearny, sitting right in the middle of disputed territory. A captain named William Fetterman, and I love this detail because it's so perfectly tragic. Fetterman boasted he could ride through the entire Sioux nation with just 80 men, just 80 soldiers, and he'd cut through thousands of warriors like they were nothing. Red Cloud decided to grant his wish. It's a frozen morning near the fort. A small party of warriors appears, led by a young fighter named Crazy Horse. Remember that name too, harassing wood-cutting details, drawing attention. Fetterman sees his chance for glory. He takes his command, all 81 men including himself, and pursues these warriors over a ridge called Lodge Trail Ridge, and this is where it gets interesting. Because on the other side of that ridge, hidden in draws and ravines in the frozen ground, 2,000 warriors were waiting. Not dozens, not hundreds, 2,000. Think about what happened next. 20 minutes. That's all it took. In 20 minutes, every single one of Fetterman's 81 soldiers lay dead in the snow, their bodies bristling with arrows. Some sources say the bodies had so many arrows in them that they looked like porcupines. The Lakota called it the Battle of the 100 in the Hand. We called it the Fetterman Massacre. Here's a detail that shows you how complete this victory was. Woman chief, a Crow warrior who rode with men and counted more coup than most warriors, fought alongside the Lakota that day. The Crow and Lakota were traditional enemies, had been fighting each other for generations. But now they were united against the whites. That's how serious things had become. The news reached Washington like a thunderbolt. The entire command wiped out, annihilated. This wasn't supposed to happen. The army sent more soldiers, more supplies, more guns. But Red Cloud's confederation made the Bozeman Trail completely unusable. Supply wagons burned, isolated soldiers vanished. The forts became prisons, surrounded by hostile forces that could strike anywhere, any time. And then something remarkable happened. The bean counters in Washington started doing math. Protecting the Bozeman Trail was costing $1 million per mile. In 1860s money, understand. While generating exactly zero revenue. Not a cent. It was a financial catastrophe wrapped in a military disaster. So the United States government did something unprecedented. They gave up. They abandoned their forts. They admitted defeat. Warriors gathered to watch Fort Phil Kearny burn. Red Cloud himself stood there as flames consumed the stockade walls, as everything the soldiers had built turned to ash and smoke. It was one of the only times in American history that the United States military abandoned forts to a native enemy. A complete, undeniable victory. But here's the thing that makes this moment so tragic when you know what's coming next. Some of the older warriors, the wise ones who had seen more winters, they weren't celebrating quite as hard as the young men. Black Elk's father, according to the stories passed down, had visions even on that day of triumph. Visions of darker days ahead because they'd won the battle. They'd won the war, technically. They'd forced the United States to abandon the Bozeman Trail, to sign a treaty acknowledging their sovereignty over this territory. But winning against the United States in 1867, that was like slapping a sleeping bear. The bear was going to wake up, and when it did, it was going to be angry. Red Cloud understood this, I think. You can see it in what he did next. He didn't trust the peace, but he understood something fundamental that a lot of warriors couldn't accept yet. The old way of life, the completely free-roaming buffalo hunting way of life that was ending. The only question was how it would end and what would come after. The Great Plains in 1867 stretched endless and free, ruled by people who had lived there for generations, who knew every valley and stream, who could disappear into the landscape like smoke. 300,000 Native Americans still following the buffalo, still living as their ancestors had lived. But those iron rails kept coming. The settlers kept coming. The soldiers kept coming. And the thunder that Red Cloud had unleashed at Fort Phil Kearny, that thunder was going to echo in ways nobody could predict. Not the victorious warriors celebrating that winter. Not the humiliated soldiers retreating east. Not the politicians in Washington making promises they had no intention of keeping. The stage was set. The players were in position. And what happened next would determine the fate of an entire way of life. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what happened when Red Cloud went to Fort Laramie to sign the treaty that was supposed to guarantee peace forever. And we'll see just how long forever lasts when there's gold involved. Spring of 1868. Fort Laramie, Wyoming Territory. The Great Council is about to begin, and chiefs are arriving who have never sat at white men's tables before. Some of them have never even seen a fort this size. They're coming from across the northern plains, Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and they're coming because Red Cloud's victory has changed the equation. Now here's what makes this moment so unusual. Red Cloud himself isn't there yet. He refused to come until every soldier abandoned those forts, until he could see with his own eyes that Fort Phil Kearny was burned to the ground. The negotiations start without him, which tells you everything about who held the power at that moment. The United States government is negotiating with an empty chair because the warrior who should be sitting in it won't show up until his conditions are met. Think about that for a second. When in American history did that ever happen? When did the United States wait for a native leader to decide when he was ready to negotiate? The treaty commissioners are getting nervous. They need this treaty. They need it politically. They need it economically, and they need it to save face after the military disaster of Red Cloud's war. So they wait. And finally, in November, 7 months after negotiations started, Red Cloud arrives. He walks into Fort Laramie after watching the last fort burn, after securing a complete military victory. And here's where it gets complicated, because sitting across from him is another chief named Spotted Tail. And Spotted Tail is saying something very different than what Red Cloud wants to hear. Spotted Tail had been east. He'd seen New York City. He'd seen Philadelphia. He'd seen the endless populations of the eastern cities. More white people in one city than all the Native Americans on the plains combined. And Spotted Tail is telling the other chiefs, we cannot win a long war against these numbers. We won this battle, but the mathematics don't work. It's one of those moments where two men can both be right. Red Cloud is right that they won militarily. Spotted Tail is right about what that victory ultimately means. The treaty they sign, the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, creates the Great Sioux Reservation. All of present-day South Dakota west of the Missouri River, that's a massive amount of land. 60,000 square miles. And it does something else remarkable. It declares the Black Hills, the Pahasapa, as unceded Indian territory that will belong to the Lakota forever, forever. That's a white man's word, and it's about to mean absolutely nothing. But before we get to that betrayal, I want you to understand what life looked like on the agencies in those first years after the treaty. Because this is where things get really interesting. Traditional life didn't just snap and break. It bent, it adapted, it tried to survive. Young warriors still went out hunting buffalo beyond reservation boundaries. The treaty technically allowed this. They could hunt in unceded territories as long as the buffalo ranged there. And the buffalo still ranged, though the herds were getting smaller. The hide hunters were already at work. White men with long rifles who killed buffalo by the thousands and took only the hides, leaving the meat to rot on the plains. But there were still enough buffalo that the traditional hunts continued. The sun dance happened every summer. This was the central ceremony of plains life, where warriors like Sitting Bull, and we need to talk about Sitting Bull, would sacrifice flesh for visions. Sitting Bull was a Hunkpapa holy man, and his body was covered with sundance scars. Each scar represented a sacrifice, pieces of flesh offered to Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, in exchange for visions that would guide the people. Women continued their work too, adapting in ways that show you how cultures survive. They'd been doing quill work for generations, intricate designs made from dyed porcupine quills. Now they had access to trade beads, glass beads in colors that didn't exist in nature, and they created something new, beadwork that used traditional patterns but in these vibrant new materials. They were teaching their daughters these patterns, and embedded in those geometric designs were stories, histories, sacred knowledge that couldn't be written down because it wasn't meant to be written down. Children grew up in both worlds. They learned the bow and the rifle. They spoke Lakota in the teepees and learned English from missionaries. Some parents wanted this. They could see that their children would need to navigate the white man's world. Others resisted fiercely, seeing language as the soul of a people. It's 1872 now, and something is about to shatter this uneasy coexistence. Whispers start reaching the agencies. Rumors from the Black Hills, Pahasapa, the sacred center of the Lakota world. Gold. Someone thinks there might be gold in the Black Hills. Now, the government knew what this meant. They knew the Fort Laramie Treaty explicitly protected the Black Hills. They knew that sending an expedition there would violate the treaty they'd signed just 4 years earlier. They knew all of this. They sent the expedition anyway, summer of 1874. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, remember that name because it's going to become the most famous name in this entire story, leads 1,200 soldiers into the Pahasapa. Officially, they're mapping. Officially, they're looking for a site for a new fort. Officially, it's a scientific expedition. Unofficially, they're looking for gold. Custer brings geologists, miners, newspaper correspondents. He brings his brass band, and they play Gary Owen, the 7th Cavalry's marching song, in valleys where only eagles had cried before. The column is so large, so loud, that they're not discovering anything. They're announcing themselves, and they find it. Gold. Right there in French Creek. In the heart of the Black Hills, the newspaper correspondents send dispatches. Gold in the Black Hills! The stories hit Eastern papers, and suddenly, every broke prospector in America knows where he's headed. The treaty, that piece of paper signed just 6 years. Earlier saying the Black Hills belong to the Lakota forever, that treaty might as well not exist. Government makes a half-hearted attempt to keep miners out. They send soldiers to turn back prospecting parties. But you can't stop a gold rush with a few cavalry patrols. Miners flood in by the thousands. They establish camps that become towns, Deadwood, Custer City. They're claiming land, building structures, establishing facts on the ground, and the government. The government decides the solution is to buy the Black Hills from the Lakota. They send a commission in 1875 to negotiate a purchase. They offer $6 million for the Black Hills. The commissioners must have thought this was generous. $6 million was real money in 1875, but they fundamentally misunderstood what they were asking. The Black Hills weren't real estate to the Lakota. They were the sacred center of the world, the place where creation happened. Selling the Black Hills would be like asking the Pope to sell the Vatican. Worse, actually, because the Black Hills were woven into every ceremony, every origin story, every understanding of how the world worked. The negotiations fail. The Lakota won't sell, so the government tries a different approach. They declare that any Lakota not on the reservation by January 31st, 1876, will be considered hostile, will be considered at war with the United States. Now think about what this means. It's winter, the northern plains in January. Temperatures 40 below zero. They're ordering thousands of people, families with children, elders, entire bands, to travel hundreds of miles through blizzards to report to agencies, or be declared enemies of the United States. Many bands never even receive the order. The messengers can't reach them through the winter storms. Other bands receive the order and laugh at the absurdity. Travel in January? Impossible. And even if they could, why would they? They're not doing anything wrong. They're hunting in territories the treaty says they can hunt in. And there's Sitting Bull. Remember I mentioned him earlier? Sitting Bull is leading the largest group of non-treaty Lakota. He'd never signed any treaty, never accepted any government rations, never agreed to live on a reservation. From his perspective, he's simply living as his people have always lived, in territories that are legally theirs. But Sitting Bull is seeing things others aren't quite acknowledging yet. The buffalo herds are shrinking every year. The hide hunters are systematic, organized, deadly efficient. They can kill 50, 60, 100 buffalo in a day. They work in teams, shooters, skinners, wagon drivers. They're not hunting for food. They're harvesting a resource like cutting timber or mining coal. And they're doing it so efficiently that the herds are visibly diminishing. Sitting Bull sees rotting carcasses spread across the plains. Buffalo killed for their hides, their meat left to rot. He sees rivers of blood where herds were slaughtered. He sees the future in those carcasses, a prophecy of extinction not just for the buffalo, but for the way of life that depended on them. The deadline passes. January 31st, 1876 comes and goes. Thousands of Lakota are still out in the unceded territories, and now, by government decree, they're hostiles. They're at war. And here's the thing that's so tragic about this moment. Many of them don't even know it yet. They're living their lives, hunting what buffalo remain, practicing their ceremonies, raising their children. They're not at war with anyone, but war is coming for them anyway. The army is already planning a spring campaign. 3 columns will converge on the Powder River country. They'll find these hostile bands. They'll force them onto the reservations. It's going to be a summer campaign, they figure. A few months of campaigning, a few battles maybe, and the whole thing will be resolved before the snow falls again. They have no idea what's waiting for them along a river the Lakota call the Greasy Grass, and the whites will call the Little Bighorn. It's late spring, 1876. The moon of making fat, the Lakota call it. The time when the buffalo are healthy and the grass is green and life is good. And something is happening that hasn't happened in living memory, maybe hasn't ever happened on this scale. The bands are gathering, not just a few hundred people, not even a few thousand. We're talking about the greatest gathering in Plains Indian history. 10,000 people, maybe more. Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, traditional allies and even some traditional enemies, all converging on one location along the Little Bighorn River. The whites will call it the Little Bighorn. The Lakota call it the Greasy Grass. Picture what this looks like. The village stretches 3 miles along the riverbank. 3 miles of teepees. 7 camp circles, each representing different bands. Hunkpapa, Oglala, Minneconjou, Brule, Sanzark, Cheyenne. Each circle with its own leaders, its own traditions, but unified in purpose. This isn't just a war camp. This is a flowering of plains culture that will never happen again at this scale, and Sitting Bull is at the center of it all. Now, I mentioned Sitting Bull before, but we need to understand who this man is at this moment in history. He's not young. He's in his 40s, which is getting up there for a plains warrior. His body is covered with Sundance scars. He's a holy man, a medicine man, someone who has visions. But he's also a war chief, a strategist, someone warriors will follow into battle. In early June, Sitting Bull performs the sun dance, and this isn't some casual ceremony, this is the full traditional ordeal. His adopted brother Jumping Bull uses an awl to cut 50 pieces of flesh from each of Sitting Bull's arms. 100 pieces of flesh offered as sacrifice. Then Sitting Bull dances, staring at the sun, dancing for hours while blood runs down his arms, and he has a vision. He sees soldiers falling into camp upside down, like grasshoppers with their heads cut off. He sees them falling from the sky into the village, and he knows what this means. A great victory is coming. The soldiers will attack, and they will be defeated. Word of this vision spreads through the camp circles. It strengthens hearts. Warriors who might have been uncertain now feel the spiritual power behind what they're doing. They're not just fighting. They're fulfilling a prophecy, but let me tell you what else is happening in this massive camp. Because if we only focus on the military aspects, we miss what made this moment so extraordinary. Life is happening. Young warriors are courting women according to ancient customs. A warrior who's interested in a woman will wait outside her family's teepee, wrapped in a courting blanket. If she comes out and stands with him under the blanket, they can talk privately. Her family watches from inside, and if they approve, maybe there will be a marriage. If they don't approve, well, sometimes young people run off together anyway. Human nature transcends culture. Grandmothers are teaching children the winter counts, pictographic histories painted on buffalo hides that record important events. Each symbol represents a year. The year the stars fell, the year of the great sickness, the year the horses were stolen. These winter counts are living history, oral tradition made visual. Women are decorating tippies with geometric patterns that aren't just art. They're family histories, clan affiliations, spiritual symbols. A trained eye can look at a teepee and know who lives there, what their lineage is, what their spiritual connections are. Boys are practicing with miniature bows, competing to see who can hit a rolling hoop. Girls are learning beadwork patterns that encode sacred knowledge. Elders are telling stories that teach lessons about courage, about generosity, about how to be a good person. And there's Crazy Horse. We saw him briefly at the Fetterman fight as a young warrior. Now he's in his 30s, and he's become something special. He's a Heyoka, a contrary, someone who received a thunder vision that makes him do things backward. He paints lightning bolts on his face. His war pony is trained to do things other horses won't do. He's strange, he's different, and warriors follow him because he's proven himself in battle after battle. Crazy Horse is preparing for what's coming. He knows it's coming. Everyone knows it's coming. The army columns are out there converging on this area. Scouts have been tracking them for weeks. This isn't going to be an ambush like the Fetterman fight. This is going to be something bigger. June 25th. 1876. Early afternoon. The day is hot, the sun beating down. In the massive village along the greasy grass, people are doing ordinary things. Women are working on hides. Children are playing in the river. Some men are sleeping after a night of dancing. Others are tending horses. Then scouts come racing in. Soldiers, a lot of soldiers. Coming fast. What the Lakota don't know, what they can't know yet, is that the man leading these soldiers is George Armstrong Custer, the same Custer who led the expedition into the Black Hills 2 years earlier. The man whose discovery of gold led directly to this moment. And Custer has divided his force into 3 columns because he's convinced the village will try to flee when they see soldiers coming. Custer has 647 men in his entire command. He's split them up. He's attacking what he thinks is a fleeing village. He's wrong about everything. The village isn't fleeing. The village is full of warriors who've been preparing for exactly this. And there aren't a few hundred warriors. There are 2,000. Now here's where it gets chaotic, because battles are chaotic. Multiple things are happening simultaneously. Major Reno attacks the southern end of the village with about 140 men. He gets into the camp, but the resistance is fierce. Women are singing strong heart songs, encouraging the warriors. Children are running to safety. Warriors are grabbing whatever weapons are closest. Reno's attack stalls. Then it breaks. His men retreat across the river and up onto bluffs, where they dig in. Some of them will survive the next 2 days, pinned down on those bluffs. Some won't, but the main event is happening elsewhere. Crazy Horse leads about 1,000 warriors in a sweeping charge from the north. Other war leaders bring their fighters from different directions. They're not doing this randomly. There's coordination here. There's strategy. They're surrounding a portion of the battlefield, and on a hillside that will forever be called Custer Hill, George Armstrong Custer and 5 companies of the 7th Cavalry, 265 men, are being swarmed by warriors like angry hornets. Think about what this looks like. The dust from 10,000 ponies is darkening the sky. The sound is overwhelming. Gunfire, war cries, screaming horses, the thud of arrows hitting flesh. It's chaos and noise and violence at a scale most of these soldiers have never experienced. Some accounts say the soldiers were so scared they were shooting their own horses to create barricades. Some accounts say they maintained discipline until the end. The truth is probably a mix. Some men kept fighting, some panicked, all of them died. Less than an hour. That's how long it took. When the dust settled, Custer and every man who rode with him up that hillside lay dead. The bodies were stripped of weapons and uniforms. These were valuable resources. Some bodies were mutilated, which sounds barbaric to modern ears until you understand that this was traditional warfare, meant to prevent the dead from being whole in the afterlife. Warriors are collecting weapons, ammunition, uniforms. Women are singing victory songs. Children who hid during the battle are coming out to see what happened. The village has defended itself. The soldiers who came to destroy them have been destroyed instead. And here's what the Lakota don't know yet. Can't know yet? They've just signed their own death warrant, because when news of this battle reaches the east, when newspapers report that Custer and his entire command have been wiped out, the American public is going to lose its collective mind. This is 1876, the centennial year of American independence. The country is having celebrations, world's fairs, patriotic demonstrations. And in the middle of all this national celebration, news arrives that a beloved, and Custer was beloved in the East, seen as a dashing cavalry hero, that this beloved officer and hundreds of soldiers have been annihilated by the Indians. The reaction is going to be fury. Pure, unthinking fury. The kind of fury that leads to total war. But on June 25th, in the camps along the greasy grass, that's all in the future. Right now it's a great victory. The prophecy Sitting Bull saw in his vision has come true. The soldiers fell upside down into camp just as he foresaw. The people are safe. The village is intact. Some of the older people, the ones who remember other victories that led to worse defeats, they're quieter in their celebration. They know that victories against the whites tend to bring more whites, angrier whites, better armed whites. But the young warriors, they're celebrating. They've just defeated the United States Army. They've avenged the invasion of the Black Hills. They've proven that the old ways still work, that warriors can still protect their people. The village will stay together for a few more weeks, then gradually break up as different bands go different directions for better hunting. Some will head toward Canada, thinking maybe they can stay free north of the line. Others will head deeper into the Powder River country. Some, seeing the handwriting on the wall, will start drifting back toward the agencies. But the summer of the greasy grass, this moment of unity, of cultural flowering, of military triumph, this will never happen again. This is the high point, the peak. After this, it's all downhill, because George Armstrong Custer is dead on a hillside in Montana. And the United States is about to unleash hell. General Philip Sheridan. If you know anything about the Civil War, you know this name. He's the man who burned the Shenandoah Valley so thoroughly that, in his words, a crow would have to carry its own rations to fly across it. He perfected total war against the Confederacy, destroyed not just armies, but the economic base that supported those armies. Burned crops, killed livestock, made the civilian population suffer until they couldn't support the war effort anymore. Now he's in command of military operations on the plains, and he's going to do the same thing to the Lakota that he did to Virginia. His strategy is brutally simple. Destroy the villages and you destroy the Indians. Those are his words. Not defeat the warriors, not win battles. Destroy the villages. Go after the families, the food supplies, the shelter. Make survival impossible. And here's the key detail that makes this strategy so devastating. He's going to do it in winter. Summer warfare on the plains favors the Native Americans. They know the terrain. Their ponies are healthy and fast. They can scatter and regroup. They can live off the land. Summer campaigns had been failing for decades because the army couldn't catch fast-moving bands in good weather. But winter changes everything. In winter, ponies are weak from lack of good grazing. Families are grouped together in camps because that's how you survive plains winters. Food supplies are concentrated. All your dried meat, your pemmican, your buffalo robes are in one place. You can't scatter in a blizzard with children and elders. You can't live off the land when the land is frozen. Winter makes the strong vulnerable. And Sheridan knows it. He picks his commander carefully. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie. The Lakota call him Bad Hand because he's missing fingers from a Civil War wound. But they should fear the name for a different reason. Mackenzie is one of the most effective cavalry commanders the Army has. He doesn't give up. He doesn't turn back. He marches through conditions that would stop normal men. And Mackenzie has scouts. Pawnee and Shoshone warriors who know every hiding place because they've been fighting the Lakota and Cheyenne for generations. These aren't just guides, they're eager participants. Old tribal enemies settling scores while wearing blue coats. It's one of those brutal realities of history that doesn't fit neat narratives. Native peoples weren't unified. Ancient hatreds and rivalries meant some tribes saw the American conquest as an opportunity for revenge. November the 25th, 1876. Just 5 months after the Little Bighorn, the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming territory. Morning comes bitter cold. We're talking temperatures below zero. Much colder at night. Dull Knife's Cheyenne village is sleeping. About 200 lodges. Maybe 800 people total, warriors, women, children, elders. They're in winter camp, which means they're settled in, prepared for the cold months ahead. Their ponies are corralled nearby. Their winter food supplies are stored. Buffalo robes keep the lodges warm. They feel secure in these mountains. At dawn, with the morning star still visible, Mackenzie's 4th Cavalry attacks. About 1,000 soldiers, including those Pawnee and Shoshone scouts. The attack is overwhelming and immediate. Soldiers charge through the lodges. Women grab children and run into the snow. Warriors grab whatever weapons are closest. Sometimes rifles, sometimes just knives or bows. Some warriors don't have time to grab anything. They fight with their hands, trying to buy time for their families to escape. It's chaos and panic and terror. Imagine being jolted awake by gunfire and shouting in a language you don't speak, grabbing your children and running barefoot into snow, into cold that burns your skin like fire. 3 hours. In 3 hours it's over. The 4th Cavalry has destroyed 200 lodges. 700 ponies are killed, shot, because Mackenzie knows that without ponies the survivors can't run far. Tons of buffalo robes burn in massive bonfires. Winter food supplies, all the dried meat and pemmican carefully prepared for the cold months, destroyed. Everything the band needs to survive the winter is gone. Now comes the truly horrific part. The survivors, women, children, elders, wounded warriors, are in the mountains in late November. The temperature that night drops to 40 degrees below zero. 40 below? That's cold that kills in minutes without proper shelter. Babies freeze to death at their mothers' breasts. Children wrapped in whatever scraps of cloth or hide their parents grabbed don't make it through the night. 11 children die that first night. 11, not from bullets, from cold, from exposure, from having their shelter and protection destroyed. The survivors have to walk. They have to find help. The nearest Lakota camps are miles away through frozen mountains. Some people lose fingers and toes to frostbite. Some lose feet. Some don't make it at all. The ones who do make it arrive at Crazy Horse's camp as broken refugees. Proud Cheyenne, who were self-sufficient yesterday, are now begging their Lakota relatives for food, for robes, for shelter. And Crazy Horse's people share what they have. That's the code. You help your relatives. But now, multiple bands are living on food supplies meant for one band. Starvation spreads like disease. This is Sheridan's strategy, working exactly as designed. Destroy one village, and multiple villages suffer. Create refugees, and the refugees strain everyone else's resources. Repeat this through the winter, and eventually there's nowhere to run, nothing to eat, no way to survive except surrender. Mackenzie hits other camps. Other commanders do the same. Colonel Nelson Miles, the Indians call him Bear Coat because of his distinctive fur coat. He's out there too, leading infantry through weather that's supposed to stop military operations. Infantry, understand? Men on foot marching through blizzards, carrying their supplies, refusing to turn back. And Crazy Horse? He's still out there, the last major leader refusing to surrender. He's leading his people through the frozen Badlands, trying to stay ahead of the converging columns, playing what amounts to a deadly game of cat and mouse, but his people are dying. Not from battles, from starvation and cold. They're eating their ponies. When the ponies are gone, they eat bark from trees. When there's no bark, they boil leather from parfleches, the rawhide containers used for storage, trying to extract any nutrition at all. Children's eyes grow hollow with hunger. That's a detail that comes up again and again in the accounts, the look in children's eyes. Bellies swollen from malnutrition. Elders making the decision to walk out into blizzards alone so their portion of food can go to the young. It's cultural practice wrapped in tragedy. The old sacrifice for the young, making their deaths meaningful, but it's still death from a war they didn't start. Winter warfare isn't glorious. There are no dramatic cavalry charges, no heroic last stands. It's just grinding, relentless pressure. Cold and hunger doing what bullets couldn't. By spring of 1877, Crazy Horse knows it's over. His people are dying. Not might die, are actively dying right now. Children are dying of starvation, while he leads them through frozen wilderness. Warriors are too weak to fight. Ponies are too weak to run. May 6, 1877. Fort Robinson, Nebraska. Crazy Horse leads 900 starving people in to surrender. 900 survivors of a band that was twice that size the previous summer. Where did the others go? Some joined other bands. Some died. Some are still out there trying to hold on. Crazy Horse hands his rifle to a soldier. His Winchester, the weapon that killed who knows how many soldiers at the Little Bighorn. He hands it over. And he says something that gets recorded, gets written down, becomes part of history. I was hostile to the white man. We preferred hunting to a life of idleness on our reservations. At times we did not get enough to eat, and we were not allowed to hunt. All we wanted was peace and to be left alone. That's the voice of defeat right there. Not military defeat, they'd won battles, but the defeat of a way of life. The recognition that fighting isn't possible when your children are starving. For 4 months, Crazy Horse lives at Fort Robinson. The army doesn't quite know what to do with him. He's famous now. His name was in the eastern newspapers after the Little Bighorn. Some officers want him as an army scout. Some want him imprisoned. Some want him dead because they're afraid he'll lead a breakout. In September, there's a misunderstanding about whether Crazy Horse is planning to leave the agency. Or maybe it's not a misunderstanding, maybe it's manufactured. Maybe some people decide he's too dangerous to live free. We don't know for certain. What we do know is this. September 5th, 1877. Soldiers try to arrest Crazy Horse. There's a struggle. His own people, agency Indians, former warriors now working for the army, they hold his arms. And a soldier named William Gentles drives his bayonet into Crazy Horse's back. The blade pierces his kidney. He dies that night. His last words, as recorded by his father, are, "My father, I am badly hurt. Tell the people it is no use to depend on me anymore." He's maybe 36 years old. The warrior who helped annihilate Custer's command just 15 months earlier dies on the floor of a guardhouse, killed while held by his own people, at an age when most men are in their prime. They bury him somewhere in the Badlands. His parents take his body secretly and bury it in a hidden location that remains unknown to this day. He's never found. In a way, he's still free, but his people aren't free. The winter campaigns accomplished what summer battles couldn't. The combination of destroyed villages, killed ponies, burned food supplies, and relentless winter pressure broke the resistance. By the end of 1877, virtually all the free-roaming bands have surrendered. Sitting Bull. He's in Canada with maybe 1,000 followers, living as refugees on land that isn't theirs, slowly starving because the buffalo are disappearing on both sides of the border. The Lakota wars are essentially over. The military phase anyway. What comes next isn't warfare, it's something worse. It's the systematic destruction of culture, language, religion, everything that makes a people who they are. The thunder Sheridan unleashed in winter is fading now. But in its wake, it's left destruction so complete that generations will struggle to recover. Winter warfare didn't just defeat warriors. It broke nations, the reservation years. If you thought the war was brutal, what comes after is worse in ways that are harder to describe. Because battles end. Suffering doesn't. Picture this. You're a Lakota warrior. Just a few years ago you were riding across the plains, hunting buffalo, living free. Now you're standing in line for rations, government rations, and you're waiting for beef that's often rancid, flour that's full of worms, blankets that fall apart when you wash them. You're waiting for food that makes you sick, on land that's a fraction of what the treaties promised, under the watch of Indian agents who are getting rich by stealing from you, because that's what's happening. The corruption is systematic and shameless. Government contractors are supposed to deliver specific quantities and qualities of food and supplies. They deliver garbage and pocket the difference. Cattle shipments arrive as walking skeletons. Flour comes mixed with sand, those famous Hudson Bay blankets that are supposed to last years. They dissolve in the first washing, and if you complain, if you speak up about this theft, your rations get cut, or you get imprisoned. Or worse, the traditional chiefs, men like Red Cloud who negotiated in good faith, who thought treaties meant something, they're figureheads now. They have titles, but no real power. The real power belongs to progressive Indians, men who cut their hair short, who wear citizen clothes, who speak English and agree with whatever the agents say. These are the ones who get favors, who get the better rations, who get positions of authority over their own people. It's a system designed to break spirits. And for a lot of people it works, but culture survives in hidden spaces, always. Because you can conquer land, you can defeat armies, but ideas? Those are harder to kill. Grandmothers still teach beadwork to their granddaughters. Those geometric patterns aren't just decoration. They're winter counts, family histories, sacred knowledge encoded in color and design. A trained eye can read a piece of beadwork like reading a book. Each pattern tells a story. Each color combination has meaning. The agents don't understand this, so they don't ban it. The culture survives in plain sight. Medicine men practice healing ceremonies in remote valleys. They adapt rituals to avoid detection. If sweat lodges are forbidden near the agencies, they build them in hidden coulees. If the sun dance is outlawed, they perform modified versions in secret, teaching the young the sacred songs in whispers. And something new spreads across the reservations. The Native American Church. It blends Christian symbols with peyote ceremonies. The visions that come from the peyote medicine connect participants to ancestral spirits, to power that the agents can't control. It's adaptation, it's survival, it's resistance in spiritual form. Children returning from boarding schools, and we need to talk about the boarding schools, they create their own form of resistance. They've been taught to read and write English? Fine. They use that literacy to petition Washington, to write down oral histories before the elders die, to secretly teach younger siblings Lakota at night. The boarding schools. This is where the cruelty becomes systematic policy. Kill the Indian, save the man. That's the official motto of the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, founded in 1879 by Richard Pratt, a former Army officer. His theory is that Indian culture is the problem. Strip away the culture, and you save the person. So children vanish into wagons. Soldiers or Indian police. Because yes, some Indians work for the government now, enforcing these policies on their own people. They come to the reservations and take children. Sometimes parents consent because they're told their rations will be cut if they refuse. Sometimes children are just taken. At Carlisle and schools like it across the West, the first thing they do is cut the children's hair. In Lakota culture, cutting hair is a sign of mourning. You cut your hair when someone dies. These children's hair is cut by force, by matrons who don't speak their language, don't care about their traditions. The children are mourning the death of their identity. They're given English names: Charles, Mary, William, Sarah. Their real names, names that connect them to ancestors, to clans, to sacred things. Those names are forbidden. They're beaten for speaking Lakota, even accidentally, even in whispers. Speak English or get hit. That's the rule. They're taught that their parents are savages, that their way of life was evil, that everything they knew before was wrong and shameful. Some children survive this. They learn to navigate both worlds. They become translators, advocates, bridges between cultures. Some, like Charles Eastman, a Santee Sioux who becomes a doctor, who graduates from Dartmouth, they achieve remarkable things despite the trauma. But others come home broken. They don't speak Lakota anymore. They don't fit on the reservation. They don't fit in white society either. They're caught between worlds, belonging to neither, and some never come home at all. The death rates at these boarding schools are horrifying. Disease spreads through overcrowded dormitories. Tuberculosis, influenza, pneumonia. Children who arrived healthy die from diseases their bodies have no immunity to. They're buried in school cemeteries far from home. Their parents sometimes not even notified for months. But it's 1881 now, and someone important is coming back to the reservation. Sitting Bull. He's been in Canada for 4 years, living as a refugee. The buffalo are gone there too. His people are starving. The Canadian government wants him gone. He has no choice. He surrenders his rifle at Fort Buford, a Winchester rifle. And he says something that should be remembered. I wish it to be remembered that I was the last man of my tribe to surrender my rifle. The last man. The last free man. The government is terrified of him. Not because he's going to fight. He's done fighting. He knows that's over. But because of his influence. He's a holy man. People listen to him. So they keep him under virtual arrest, controlling where he goes, who he sees. And then Buffalo Bill Cody shows up with an offer. Come tour with his Wild West show. Perform for crowds. Show them what real Indians are like. Now think about this for a moment. Sitting Bull, the holy man who led the resistance at Little Bighorn, whose Sundance visions predicted Custer's defeat, is now going to perform in a circus. A traveling show where he'll ride around an arena while white audiences cheer and buy his autograph for $1. It's humiliation wrapped in opportunity. The money is good. Better than anything available on the reservation. And Sitting Bull does something interesting with that money. He gives it away. To poor children. White children, Indian children, doesn't matter. He sees hungry children, and he gives them money. He sees in their hunger a common suffering that transcends race, but performing for crowds who see him as a curiosity, a relic of a vanished past, it must have been soul-crushing. It's 1889 now. The buffalo are gone, not diminished, gone, extinct in the wild for practical purposes. A few hundred survive in private herds. That's all that's left of the millions that once blackened the plains. The foundation of plains life has been exterminated in less than 20 years. The reservations are desperate places. Poverty, like most Americans, can't imagine. Hunger is constant. Disease is rampant. The traditional ways are forbidden. The new ways don't provide. And into this despair comes a prophet. His name is Wovoka. He's Paiute from Nevada, and he has a vision, a prophecy, a promise. If the people perform a certain dance, the ghost dance, if they dance and believe, then the white men will vanish like smoke. The buffalo will return. The dead will come back to life. The world will be renewed, returned to what it was before the whites came. It's a desperate hope for desperate people. And it spreads like wildfire across the reservations. The ghost dance is peaceful. It's not a war dance. There's no talk of fighting. It's spiritual, mystical. Dancers wear special shirts painted with sacred symbols. They dance for hours, sometimes days, until they have visions. In those visions, they see their dead relatives. They see the buffalo returning. They see a world made whole. The Indian agents panic. They see hundreds of Indians dancing, wearing special regalia, talking about a new world. They don't understand it's spiritual, not military. They think it's a war movement. They call for troops. Sitting Bull's camp on the Standing Rock Reservation is dancing the ghost dance. The agent wants it stopped. He wants Sitting Bull arrested. On December 15, 1890, Indian police, Lakota men working for the government, come to arrest Sitting Bull. There's a struggle. Sitting Bull's followers try to prevent the arrest. Someone fires a shot. Then everyone's shooting. In the chaos and gunfire, Sitting Bull falls. Multiple bullets. He dies in front of his cabin, killed by his own people, who are working for the government that defeated them all. He's 59 years old. The holy man who predicted the Little Bighorn victory, who surrendered as the last free man, who performed in Buffalo Bill's circus, dies in a confused firefight outside his own home. His followers scatter in panic. About 200 people flee south toward the Cheyenne River, toward safety, toward anything away from this violence. They join up with Bigfoot's band of Sioux. About 350 people total now, mostly women and children. They're trying to reach the Pine Ridge Agency, where they hope Red Cloud can protect them, but the army is terrified. Sitting Bull is dead, his followers are on the move, and the ghost dance has everyone on edge. Troops are mobilized. The 7th Cavalry, yes, Custer's old unit, reformed and looking for revenge after 15 years. They're deployed to intercept Bigfoot's band, December 28th, 1890. Bigfoot's people are found near a place called Wounded Knee Creek. Bigfoot himself is dying of pneumonia, coughing up blood. His people are freezing, starving, desperate. They surrender immediately. No resistance. The cavalry escorts them to Wounded Knee and makes camp. That night, more troops arrive. 4 Hotchkiss guns, rapid-fire artillery, are positioned on the hills surrounding the camp. The Sioux are in a valley, surrounded by soldiers with modern weapons. December 29th, dawns cold. The soldiers decide to disarm the Indians. Tensions are high. Some warriors don't want to give up their weapons. These rifles cost money, and without them, how will they hunt? But slowly, reluctantly, they're turning in their guns. Then someone's rifle discharges. Maybe it's accidental, a nervous finger on a trigger. Maybe someone fired on purpose, one last act of defiance. We'll never know for certain. What happens next is slaughter. The Hotchkiss guns on the hills open fire. These aren't rifles. These are artillery pieces firing explosive shells. They're shooting into a group of people that includes women and children. Soldiers fire at point-blank range. People run in every direction, but there's nowhere to run. The valley is surrounded. Mothers shield children with their bodies. Young warriors grab whatever weapons they can and fight back, selling their lives to buy seconds for their families to flee. It's not a battle. Battles have 2 sides fighting. This is a massacre. When the shooting stops, about 250 Lakota lie dead or dying in the snow. Bodies freeze in grotesque positions. A mother curved over her infant, both dead. Children running with arms outstretched, frozen mid-stride. Old people who couldn't run, shot where they sat. A blizzard comes that night. 3 days later, soldiers return to bury the dead. The bodies are frozen solid, twisted in their death positions. They dig a mass grave, one long trench, and stack the bodies like cordwood. But there's one survivor they find. A baby girl, maybe 4 months old. She's been wrapped in her mother's shawl, sheltered against the cold. Her mother's body protected her for 4 days in the snow, 4 days in a blizzard. And this baby somehow survived. They call her Lost Bird. She becomes a symbol of survival, of tragedy, of a people's sorrow. She's adopted by a white general who found her. She grows up confused, broken, never quite fitting anywhere. She dies young, as so many survivors do, carrying trauma that has no cure. Wounded Knee is the end. Not the end of the Lakota people. They survive. But the end of armed resistance. The end of any hope that things might return to the old ways. The ghost dance promised the world would be renewed. Instead, the dancers died in the snow. The 19th century closes with the Lakota confined to reservations, their children stolen for schools, their ceremonies banned, their sacred sites desecrated, their leaders dead or imprisoned. The buffalo are gone. The free-roaming life is gone. Everything that made them who they were is supposed to be gone. But people are more than their circumstances. Culture is more than what's allowed by law. And the story isn't over. It's just entering a different chapter, one of survival against impossible odds. Life continues in the shadow of Wounded Knee, though I'm not sure life is the right word. Existence might be more accurate. Survival, endurance, it's 1891. The 20th century is coming, bringing promises of progress and modernity. Electric lights, telephones, automobiles. The world is changing fast, but on the reservations, time seems to have stopped. Or maybe gone backward. The reservation system functions as an open-air prison. That's not metaphor, it's accurate description. You can't leave without permission. You can't hunt without permission. You can't gather in groups without permission. Every aspect of life is controlled by Indian agents who wield absolute power through one simple mechanism: food distribution. Let me explain how this works. Because the system is brilliantly cruel in its design. The government promised rations in the treaties, food supplies, annuity payments. These aren't charity. They're payment for land ceded, for promises made. But the Indian agents control distribution. And the agents are usually political appointees, men who got the job as a favor, who see it as an opportunity to get rich, so they create elaborate corruption schemes. Here's how it works. The government allocates, say, 500 head of cattle for a reservation. The contractor who's supposed to deliver those cattle instead delivers 250 head. Scrawny, diseased animals that are skin and bones. The missing 250, sold elsewhere for profit. The contractor and the agent split the money. The Lakota complain. The agent reduces their rations. They complain louder. He withholds rations entirely. Or he imprisons the complainers for disturbing the peace. Flour arrives mixed with sand. Seriously, you open the bag and there's as much sand as flour. Try baking bread with that. Blankets dissolve the first time you wash them. Cloth rips like paper. Tools break the first time you use them. And these aren't accidental quality issues. This is systematic theft. Suppliers knowingly providing garbage. Agents knowingly accepting it. Everyone making money, except the people who were promised these things by treaty. Some agents become spectacularly wealthy. They build nice houses in nearby towns. They send their children to expensive schools, all on salary that shouldn't allow such wealth. Nobody investigates too closely because the corruption goes all the way up the chain. The traditional chiefs watch this happening and can't stop it. Red Cloud. Remember Red Cloud, the warrior who defeated the United States Army, who forced the abandonment of the Bozeman Trail. He's still alive. Still nominally a chief. But he's powerless. The agent decides who gets rations, who gets jobs, who gets anything. Red Cloud has a title and no authority. The real power belongs to what they call progressive Indians, men who've adopted white ways. Short hair, citizen clothes, Christian names, men who agree with the agents, who inform on anyone causing trouble, who've learned that cooperation brings rewards. This creates divisions in the community. Traditional people resent the progressives as sellouts. Progressives see themselves as realists, adapting to survive. Both groups are trying to navigate an impossible situation. Both groups are right in their own way. Both groups are suffering. But here's what the agents and bureaucrats don't understand, what they never understand. You can't kill culture by forbidding it. Culture survives in hidden spaces, in small acts of resistance, in the things that seem harmless but carry enormous meaning. Grandmothers still teach beadwork. They sit with their granddaughters, girls who maybe just came back from boarding school, who had their hair cut and their language beaten out of them, and they teach them the patterns. Not just how to make pretty designs, how to encode history, how to tell stories, how to preserve knowledge. Each pattern has meaning. The colors aren't random, they represent sacred things. The geometric designs are actually winter counts, tribal histories rendered in beads. A trained eye can look at a piece of beadwork and read it like a book. This is that family's lineage. This is the year of the great battle. This is our connection to the sacred. The agents don't see this. They see women making decorative items, maybe to sell to tourists. They don't realize they're watching the preservation of an entire worldview, one bead at a time. Medicine men still practice. Not openly. The sun dance is banned. Most ceremonies are forbidden. But in remote valleys, in hidden coulees where agents don't ride, the old ways continue. Sweat lodges built in secret. Healing ceremonies performed at night. Young people learning the songs, the prayers, the sacred knowledge. It's dangerous. Getting caught means punishment, withheld rations, imprisonment, having your children taken. But some things are worth the risk. Some knowledge is too important to let die. And something new spreads across the reservations. Something the agents can't quite categorize or ban. The Native American Church. It blends Christian symbols with traditional spirituality. Uses peyote, a cactus that grows in Mexico and Texas, as a sacrament. The ceremonies happen in tipis. Participants sit in a circle, take the peyote medicine, and have visions. In those visions, they connect with ancestors, with spiritual power that reservation life tries to suppress. It's adaptation, taking elements from the dominant culture, Christianity, which can't be banned, and blending them with native spirituality to create something new, something powerful, something that helps people survive spiritually when physical survival is grinding them down. The boarding schools keep taking children, generation after generation, but some of those children learn to use their forced education as a weapon. They've been taught to read and write English? Fine. They use that literacy to write letters to Washington, to document treaty violations, to petition for their rights, to write down oral histories before all the elders die. They teach younger siblings Lakota in secret. At night, in whispers, they pass on language that was beaten out of them. It's resistance through preservation. Charles Eastman is the perfect example of this. He's Santee Sioux, sent to boarding school as a child, educated at Dartmouth, becomes a medical doctor. In 1890, he's at Pine Ridge when Wounded Knee happens. He treats the wounded, both soldiers and Lakota. He sees the massacre's aftermath firsthand, and he writes about it. He publishes articles in Eastern magazines. He tells white audiences what really happened. He uses his education, his credentials that give him credibility in white society, to advocate for his people. He's caught between worlds, too white for some traditional people, too Indian for some white people. But he's finding a way to navigate both, to use the tools of one world to protect the other. The years crawl by. 1895, 1900, the new century arrives. The reservations stay locked in poverty. Life expectancy on Pine Ridge is lower than in many developing nations. Infant mortality is staggering. Tuberculosis kills constantly. Alcoholism, illegal on reservations but impossible to prevent, destroys families. Traditional economic systems don't work anymore. You can't hunt buffalo that don't exist. The government wants Indians to become farmers, but the land they've been given is often terrible for farming. High plains with thin soil, little water, short growing seasons. Even successful white farmers struggle on this land. Rations create dependency, which is maybe the point. People who depend on government handouts can't rebel, can't resist, can't even complain too loudly or their family starves. But then something unexpected happens. Something that changes everything, at least temporarily. 1917. The United States enters World War I. And Native Americans volunteer in numbers that exceed any other ethnic group. They're not citizens yet. That won't happen until 1924. They can't vote. They're not free to leave reservations. But they volunteer to fight for the country that conquered them. Why? Different reasons for different people. Some see it as a warrior tradition continuing in a new form. Plains culture always honored warriors. This is a way to achieve that honor again. Some hope military service might earn respect, might improve conditions for their people. Some want to prove their patriotism, to show they're loyal Americans despite everything that's been done to them. And some, honestly, just want to leave the reservation. Want to see the world, want an adventure, want to escape, even if escape means the trenches of France. Lakota men fight in France, in the Argonne forest, at Belleau Wood, in trenches filled with mud and rats and poison gas. They fight alongside white soldiers who, back home, wouldn't let them vote, wouldn't serve them in restaurants, wouldn't treat them as equals. Some become famous, code talkers, native soldiers who use their languages, the same languages they were beaten for speaking in school, to transmit secret military communications the Germans can't decode. Their forbidden languages save American lives. They come home as heroes. Technically, they're given citizenship in 1919 through the Citizenship Act for veterans. They've earned the right to vote through blood. They've proven their patriotism beyond any question, and they return to reservations that haven't changed at all. Still poverty, still corrupt agents, still forbidden ceremonies, still stolen children. The parades are over, the medals are tucked away, and they're back to being Indians in America's open-air prisons. Some veterans bring back hope. They've seen the wider world. They've fought alongside men who treated them as equals. They believe change is possible. They start advocating, organizing, demanding the rights they supposedly earned. Others come back broken. Poison gas ruined their lungs. Artillery destroyed their hearing. They've seen horrors in the trenches that combine with existing trauma. The stories their parents told them of Wounded Knee, of winter campaigns, of boarding schools. Trauma piled on trauma, and there's no treatment, no support, no help. The 1920s roar past. The Jazz Age, the boom years, economic prosperity, at least for some Americans. On the reservations, nothing changes. The poverty is the same. The restrictions are the same. Children are still stolen for schools. Ceremonies are still forbidden. Sacred sites are still desecrated. The Black Hills remain occupied. White settlers farm them, mine them, log them. In 1927, they start carving presidents' faces into Mount Rushmore, into the sacred Paha Sapa. They're literally blasting faces into stone that the Lakota consider sacred. It's desecration on a monumental scale, but nobody asks the Lakota if it's okay. Nobody cares that this is their church, their temple, their holy ground. And through all of this, the poverty, the restrictions, the cultural suppression, the ongoing theft of land and resources, somehow, impossibly, Lakota culture survives. It survives in grandmother's beadwork, in secret ceremonies, in stories told at night, in songs sung quietly where agents can't hear, in children who learn both worlds and somehow hold both in their hearts, in the simple, stubborn refusal to disappear just because disappearing would be convenient for everyone else. The 1920s end. The Great Depression begins. And if you think the Depression is hard on mainstream America, imagine what it does to people who were already living in Depression-level poverty. The reservations get worse. More hunger, more disease, more death, but still people endure. Because that's what survival looks like when glory is impossible. Quiet endurance, small acts of preservation, hope held like a candle flame in cupped hands, protecting it against the wind until maybe someday conditions improve enough to let it burn brighter. That day is coming. Not soon, not easily, but it's coming. 1934. The Indian Reorganization Act passes Congress. After 50 years of policies designed to destroy tribal identity, the government finally reverses course. Tribes can form governments again. The allotment policy, which stole 2/3 of reservation lands by dividing them into individual parcels that were then sold to whites. That policy ends. It's progress. Real progress. But here's the thing about reversing 50 years of destruction. It doesn't happen overnight. The damage runs deep, deeper than policy can quickly heal. Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota holds the poorest county in America. Not one of the poorest, period. Life expectancy matches Somalia. Unemployment runs over 80%. The housing is inadequate, often without running water or electricity. This is 1934, and this is America. And this is what reservation life looks like. The suffering isn't just economic. Uranium mining companies discover deposits on reservation lands. The Lakota don't control the mineral rights. The government does. Another theft buried in legal language. So companies mine the uranium, leave toxic waste, poison the water sources. Cancer rates spike. Birth defects increase. The land itself becomes dangerous. Government commodity food creates new health crises. The traditional diet was lean buffalo meat, wild plants, berries. The commodity diet is white flour, sugar, lard, canned goods. Diabetes becomes epidemic. Heart disease, obesity. The food that's supposed to sustain people is literally killing them, just more slowly than starvation would. But the 1930s bring one positive change. John Collier becomes Commissioner of Indian Affairs. He's the first commissioner who actually believes native cultures should survive. He ends the ban on ceremonies. The sun dance can happen openly again. Traditional religions are legal. For the first time in decades, people can practice their spirituality without hiding. Elders who preserved ceremonies in secret can now teach them openly. Young people who only heard whispered stories can participate. It's a resurrection, a rebirth of cultural practices that were supposed to be dead. The 1950s bring new attacks. The government decides, again, that reservations should be eliminated. They call it termination. The idea is to dissolve tribal governments, end federal recognition, and make Indians into regular citizens. Which sounds nice until you realize it means ending treaty obligations, selling off reservation lands, and forcing assimilation one more time. Some tribes are terminated, their reservations dissolved, their people scattered. It's devastating. But the major Lakota reservations survive, partly through fierce resistance, partly through political maneuvering, partly through luck. The relocation program runs parallel to termination. The government offers to relocate Indians from reservations to cities. Free transportation, job training, housing assistance. It sounds like opportunity. For some people, it is. They move to Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver. They find jobs, build lives, create urban Indian communities. They adapt, survive, sometimes thrive, but for many it's a disaster. They arrive in cities with no support system, no community, no understanding of urban life. The job training is inadequate. The housing is in the worst neighborhoods. They're isolated, alone, struggling. Alcoholism, depression, suicide rates soar. The government saves money, though. Moving Indians to cities costs less than providing services on reservations. And scattered, isolated Indians can't organize, can't resist. Which might be the real point of relocation, but something unexpected happens in those urban ghettos. Indians from different tribes meet each other. Lakota, Navajo, Cherokee, Apache, tribes that rarely interacted before. They're living in the same neighborhoods, facing the same problems. And they start organizing together. 1968. The American Indian movement forms in Minneapolis. Egnum, they call it. Young, angry, urban Indians who are tired of poverty, tired of discrimination, tired of watching their elders drink themselves to death. They start by patrolling neighborhoods, protecting Indians from police brutality. They organize protests. They demand treaty rights. They're militant. They're loud. They're confrontational. And they're effective. November 1969. AM activists occupy Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay. The prison is abandoned, and they claim it under an old treaty provision that says unused federal land reverts to Indians. They stay for 19 months. They're not trying to keep Alcatraz. They're making a point, getting media attention, forcing America to remember Indians exist, and it works. Suddenly, newspapers are covering Indian issues. TV cameras show up at protests. The public starts learning about broken treaties, about poverty on reservations, about the ongoing injustices. February 1973. Wounded Knee, South Dakota. The site of the 1890 massacre. AEM warriors, and they call themselves warriors deliberately, reclaiming that identity. They occupy the town. They're demanding an investigation into corruption on Pine Ridge, into the tribal government they claim is a puppet regime. Federal marshals surround them, armored personnel carriers, machine guns. It's 1877 all over again, except now the warriors have cameras, journalists, international attention. The siege lasts 71 days. There are firefights. 2 Indians die. A federal marshal is shot and paralyzed. But this time it doesn't end in massacre. It ends in negotiation. The government agrees to investigate. The warriors surrender, but they surrender having made their point. The aftermath is brutal, though. The FBI harasses AEM members for years. Some are imprisoned on questionable charges. Some die in suspicious circumstances. The government learned from Wounded Knee not to address Indian grievances, but to crush the movement more effectively. But AIM accomplished something important. They reminded America that Indians didn't vanish, aren't historical artifacts, aren't conquered peoples accepting their fate. They're here, they're fighting, and they're not going away. While AEM makes headlines, something quieter but maybe more important is happening in courts. The Black Hills claim is winding through the legal system. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 promised the Black Hills to the Lakota forever. The government took them anyway in 1877 after the gold rush made, keeping the treaty inconvenient. The Lakota never accepted that theft, never stopped claiming their sacred lands. The case reaches the Supreme Court. In 1980, the court rules. It's one of the most scathing Supreme Court decisions ever written about government treatment of Indians. The justices call it the most ripe and rank case of dishonorable dealings in our history. The court awards compensation. $100 million plus interest for the land stolen over a century ago. By the time the decision comes down, with interest, it's worth over $400 million. Today, with continued interest, it's over $2 billion. The Lakota refuse the money. Let that sink in. The poorest people in America, living in the poorest county in America, refuse $2 billion. Because the Black Hills aren't for sale. Never were for sale. Money can't replace sacred land. The Pahasapa is the center of their spiritual universe. You can't compensate for that with cash. The Black Hills are not for sale becomes their rallying cry. And they mean it. The money sits in a trust account, growing with interest, unclaimed. It's principled poverty, choosing spiritual integrity over economic relief. Not everyone on the reservations agrees with this decision. $2 billion could do a lot of good. But the tribal leadership holds firm. The battles move from battlefields to courtrooms and Congress. Treaty rights shape water disputes. Who has rights to rivers that cross reservation boundaries? The Lakota claim prior rights based on treaties. States claim sovereignty. Courts have to decide. Pipeline protests become the new form of warfare. 2016. The Dakota Access Pipeline is planned to cross under the Missouri River just north of Standing Rock Reservation. The river is their water source. A spill would be catastrophic. Thousands gather at Standing Rock, not just Lakota, Indians from across the country and their allies. They call themselves water protectors, not protesters. They're protecting water for everyone, not just themselves. It looks like the old days. Tippers go up. Warriors on horseback face police in riot gear. Except now, they have smartphones live streaming everything. Social media spreads the story globally. The world watches as police use water cannons in freezing temperatures, attack dogs, rubber bullets. The pipeline gets built anyway. The corporations have too much power, too much money. But Standing Rock shows that resistance continues, that the warrior spirit adapts to new circumstances. The weapons change, legal briefs and live streams instead of rifles and horses, but the fight continues. Language becomes a new battlefield. By 2000, fewer than 2,000 fluent Lakota speakers remain, most elderly. When they die, the language might die with them. Languages encode worldviews, ways of thinking, entire cultures. Lose the language and you lose something irreplaceable. Language immersion schools open. Young people learn Lakota as their first language, English second. It's a race against time. Recording elders before they pass. Teaching children before it's too late. Creating materials, curricula, preserving a language the government once beat out of children's mouths. Technology helps in unexpected ways. Young people upload traditional songs to YouTube. Elders on Facebook teach language lessons. Apps help people learn Lakota on their phones. The same technology that spreads dominant culture also preserves minority cultures. Reservation casinos change the economic landscape. After a 1988 law allows Indian gaming, some tribes build casinos that generate billions. Not the Lakota reservations, though. They're too remote, too poor. But other tribes show what's possible. Gaming revenue funds healthcare, education, cultural preservation. The things treaties promised but never delivered, casinos now provide. It's complicated, though. Casinos create their own problems. Gambling addiction, crime, moral questions about profiting from others' weakness. But they also create self-sufficiency, independence from government funding and government control. Today, the Lakota face challenges that would have been incomprehensible to Red Cloud or Sitting Bull. Climate change affects water supplies. Methamphetamine addiction devastates communities. Youth suicide rates are staggering, the highest in the nation. The trauma is generational, passed down like genetic inheritance, but resistance continues. Cultural preservation continues. The powwow circuit keeps traditions alive, bringing tribes together in celebration. Young people dance in regalia their grandmothers made, performing dances passed down for generations. The drum beats continue, the songs continue, the people continue. Mount Rushmore still defaces the sacred Black Hills, those blasted faces of presidents, including Washington and Jefferson, who owned slaves, and Roosevelt and Lincoln, whose policies toward Indians were often harmful. They're carved into stone the Lakota consider holy. Every year, tourists visit, take photos, see engineering triumph. They don't see desecration, but increasingly, public events begin with land acknowledgements. We acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the Lakota people. It's a small thing, maybe symbolic. But symbols matter. Recognition matters. Acknowledging that these lands were taken, that treaties were broken, that injustices occurred, that's a start. Museums return stolen artifacts. Sacred objects that were looted from graves, from battlefields, from ceremonies, they're going back to tribes. It's repatriation, literally bringing ancestors home. Human remains held in storage for scientific study are returned for proper burial. It's not justice. Justice would be impossible at this point, but it's something. The Black Hills remain occupied. The Lakota still refuse the money. The poverty continues, but so does the culture. So does the language, barely, tenuously, fighting for survival. So do the ceremonies, the songs, the stories, the identity of being Lakota. The thunder that General Sheridan unleashed in 1876, the winter campaigns, the total war, the attempt to destroy not just warriors, but an entire way of life. That thunder still echoes. You can hear it in the poverty statistics, in the trauma rates, in the suicide numbers, in the stolen generations who went through boarding schools, in the missing and murdered indigenous women whose deaths barely get investigated, but it doesn't drown out the drums anymore. The steady beat of powwow drums calling the people home, the sound of ceremony, the voices of children learning Lakota in immersion schools, the chants of water protectors defending their land, the quiet resilience of people who refuse to disappear just because their disappearance would be convenient. Red Cloud won his war in 1867. Then he lost everything that victory was meant to protect. Crazy Horse defeated Custer, then died on a guardhouse floor. Sitting Bull had his visions, and they came true, and it didn't save his people, but the people saved themselves. Through impossible circumstances, through generations of trauma, through systematic attempts at cultural genocide, they saved themselves. The Lakota Nation endures, diminished, traumatized, struggling, but enduring. Still here, still Lakota. Still singing the old songs and creating new ones. The story isn't over. It probably never will be, because this isn't a historical narrative with a neat ending. This is ongoing life, ongoing struggle, ongoing survival. The thunder echoes, yes, but listen closer. Beneath the echo you can hear something else. The drum, the heartbeat, the sound of a people who refuse to be history, who insist on being present, who are fighting for a future their ancestors would recognize. And that fight continues today.